The communication array on High Command Station Zephyr 7 crackled to life at 0347 hours, jolting Admiral Kextar from his meditation pod. The transmission came from the Outer Rim, Sector 94 Delta, where the hegemony's most advanced battle fleet had been conducting what should have been a routine planetary subjugation. "Admiral!" The voice of Fleet Commander Rixtal was barely audible through the static, punctuated by explosions in the background. We need immediate reinforcements. The humans. They're not what we expected." Kextar's 4 eyes narrowed. The preliminary reports had been clear. Earth was a backwater planet with primitive technology, no shields, no plasma weaponry, no quantum drives. Their metal ships were crude, their weapons laughably outdated. The conquest was supposed to take 6 hours. That was 3 days ago. "Commander, clarify your situation," Kextar commanded, his voice echoing through the command chamber where dozens of subordinates monitored screens showing fleet positions across the galaxy. The response came fragmented, desperate. "Sir, they're not fighting like any species we've encountered. They don't retreat when they should. They don't surrender when it's logical. And there's this one human. He's taken out 7 of our dreadnoughts with nothing but scrap metal and—" The transmission cut to screaming, then silence. Kextar stared at the dead communication panel. In 3,000 years of galactic conquest, no single being had ever destroyed a dreadnought, let alone 7. Each of those ships carried 10,000 warriors and enough firepower to glass a continent. He pulled up the tactical display. The hegemony's 19th Fleet, their elite strike force, was scattered across the Sol system like debris after a supernova. Ship markers blinked red one by one, status reports flooding in. Hull breach on level 7. Life support failing. Unknown human craft approaching fast. But it was the final transmission that made Kextar's blood run cold. It came from the flagship, Dominator, moments before its signal went dark forever. "He's here. The human with the metal tool. He's boarding us." "How is he—" The scream that followed would haunt the Admiral's dreams for cycles to come. Kextar's claws scraped against his command throne as he processed the impossible data. 1 human. 1 primitive tool. 19 capital ships reduced to floating graveyards. "Prepare the second armada," he commanded, his voice steady despite the terror growing in his chest. "And send word to the War Council. Tell them we need our champions." As subordinates scurried to carry out his orders, Kextar couldn't shake the image from the last clear footage they'd received. A figure in makeshift armor, floating in the void between ships, wielding what appeared to be nothing more than a maintenance tool. The human had looked directly into the camera before the feed cut out, and in those eyes, Kextar had seen something that made even a veteran of 1,000 battles step back from his screen. Pure, undiluted fury. The kind of fury that could tear apart an empire. Chief Engineer Marcus Mac Sullivan had been fixing things his whole life. Starship engines, life support systems, broken hearts. He had steady hands and a stubborn refusal to let anything stay broken if he could help it. But when the alien fleet appeared over Earth, something inside him broke in a way that couldn't be repaired. He'd been working a routine maintenance shift on Luna Station 3 when the first wave hit. The warning sirens barely had time to sound before the orbital defense platforms vanished in brilliant flashes of plasma fire. Mac watched through the observation deck as the UES Wellington, his daughter Sarah's ship, took a direct hit and began spinning toward Earth's atmosphere, trailing debris and bodies. The rescue shuttle he'd commandeered was never meant for combat. It was a utility craft, designed for moving supplies and personnel between stations. But as Mac welded hull plating over the life support systems and jury-rigged the mining laser into something resembling a weapon, he wasn't thinking about what the ship was meant for. He was thinking about Sarah's last transmission. "Dad, they're everywhere. Tell Mom I—" The signal had cut to static. Now, 72 hours later, Mac floated in the wreckage of what had once been the hegemony's most feared battleship. His improvised armor, welded together from hull fragments and powered by a jury-rigged fusion cell, sparked with each movement. The massive wrench in his hand, normally used for adjusting plasma conduits, dripped with alien blood. "Control, this is Ghost Rider," he spoke into his comm unit, using the call sign Sarah had jokingly given him years ago. "Hegemony Dreadnought. Painbringer is down, moving to the next target. The response from Earth Control was immediate but shaky. Mac, please, you need to fall back. The second armada just jumped into the system. 200 ships. This is insane. Mac looked out through the viewport at the approaching alien fleet, their hulls gleaming like silver daggers against the starfield. Each ship was the size of a city, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Any sane person would run. But Mac had stopped being sane the moment he'd pulled his daughter's body from the wreckage. Copy that, Control. 200, you said? Mac's voice was calm, almost conversational. He began moving through the ship's corridors, planting the makeshift explosives he'd fashioned from the dreadnought's own power cores. Better make that 199. The Painbringer detonated just as Mac's shuttle cleared the blast radius, the explosion creating a miniature sun that briefly outshone Sol itself. But he barely noticed. His attention was already focused on the next target, a carrier ship launching fighter squadrons toward Earth's remaining orbital defenses. His hands, steady as ever, made minute adjustments to the shuttle's course. The wrench at his side seemed to hum with anticipation. Somewhere in the approaching fleet, Admiral Kextar was demanding answers from his commanders. How was one human doing this? What weapons was he using? What was their tactical analysis? But Mac knew they were asking the wrong questions. They wanted to understand his strategy, his technology, his plan. They didn't understand that sometimes, when everything you love is taken away, you don't need a plan. You just need fury and steady hands and something to fix. The universe had given Mac broken alien ships. He was going to fix them permanently. The hegemony's greatest champions had never been summoned together before. Across the galaxy, beings whispered their names in fear. Vexmore the Soul Crusher, whose psychic abilities could shatter minds across star systems. Thacklon the Planet Breaker, whose war mech stood 3 kilometers tall and had personally ended 17 civilizations. Zarakel the Time Walker, who could slip between moments to strike before her enemies even knew battle had begun. They materialized on High Command Station Zephyr 7 in pillars of light, their arrival causing the very hull to groan under the weight of their combined presence. Admiral Kextar felt his knees tremble as he approached them, each champion a legend of destruction made flesh. "Show us this human," Vexmore commanded, her voice echoing inside Kextar's skull without passing through his ears. The psychic's form was wreathed in shadow, her eyes burning like collapsed stars. The tactical display shimmered to life, showing the Sol system in real time. Red markers indicated destroyed hegemony vessels. The count had reached 47. A single green dot moved between them, sometimes disappearing for hours before reappearing inside another doomed ship. "Impossible!" rumbled Thacklon, his massive frame requiring reinforced flooring just to stand on the station. "No single being has such power." But Zarakel stepped forward, her form flickering between multiple timeline echoes. "I have looked across all possible futures. In every timeline where we do not act." She paused, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic certainty. The hegemony falls. The champions watched in silence as the display updated. The human's shuttle had just crippled a battlecruiser by somehow turning its own weapons against itself. The ship listed, fires blooming along its hull before going dark. "What manner of creature are we facing?" Admiral Kextar whispered. Vexmore reached out with her psychic abilities, trying to touch the human's mind across the vast distance. For a moment, she made contact, and immediately recoiled as if burned. "His mind," she gasped, her usual composure shattered. "It's not hatred driving him. It's love. Broken love, transformed into something pure and terrible. I cannot break what is already shattered, cannot corrupt what has chosen to embrace its own destruction." Thacklon's war mech shuddered as targeting data streamed across its systems. "My scanners show he uses primitive tools, scrap metal, chemical explosives. Yet somehow..." The Planet Breaker's voice carried a note of confusion that his enemies had never heard. "Somehow, he strikes where we are weakest, knows which systems to target, fights as if he understands our technology better than we do." "Because he does," Zarakel said softly, her timeline sight showing her fragments of truth. "He fixes things. He has spent his life learning how things work, how they break, how they can be repaired. When he looks at our ships, he doesn't see weapons of war. He sees problems to be solved. The display flickered again. Another dreadnought had gone silent. "Prepare the World Ender," Admiral Kextar commanded, referring to the hegemony's ultimate weapon, a ship capable of cracking planets. "If we cannot stop this human, we will destroy the entire system." But Vexmore shook her head, still trembling from her psychic contact. "He will not be stopped by overwhelming force. I saw into his heart for just an instant, and what I found there." She turned to face the other champions, fear clear in her burning eyes. "He is not trying to win a war. He is keeping a promise to someone who can no longer hear him." Outside the station, the Second Armada was regrouping, trying to develop new tactics against an enemy who fought like no species they had ever encountered. But deep in the Sol system, Max Sullivan was already moving toward his next target, his wrench steady in his hand, his daughter's memory burning in his heart. The champions prepared for battle, confident in their legendary power. They had no idea. They were about to face something far more dangerous than any warrior, a father with nothing left to lose. The battle began in the space between Mars and Jupiter, where the asteroid belt provided perfect cover for Mac's guerrilla tactics. The champions had chosen this location carefully, open enough for Thaklan's massive war mech to maneuver, isolated enough to prevent collateral damage to their own forces. They expected to face a cornered animal. Instead, they found a craftsman at work. Mac's shuttle emerged from behind a tumbling asteroid, its hull scarred by countless battles but still flying true. He'd spent the past 6 hours studying long-range sensor data of the champions, learning their capabilities, understanding their weaknesses, just like any other engineering problem. Vexmore struck first, her psychic assault hitting Mac's mind like a tsunami of raw mental force. It was an attack that had shattered the collective consciousness of entire species, reduced warrior philosophers to drooling shells. Mac gritted his teeth and kept flying. "Impossible," Vexmore whispered, pouring more power into her assault. But Mac's mind was like trying to break something that had already been ground to powder. Every psychic probe found only memories of his daughter, grief so pure and complete that it had become armor against lesser pain. Thaklan's war mech charged through the asteroid field, plasma cannons blazing. Each shot had enough power to vaporize a city block, but Mac's shuttle danced between them with impossible precision. The human had studied the mech's firing patterns, calculated its reaction times, identified the brief moments when its massive bulk created blind spots in its sensor array. A mining charge, no bigger than Mac's fist, struck the war mech's left knee joint at the exact moment Thaklan was shifting weight for another salvo. The explosion was tiny by stellar warfare standards, barely enough to crack a fighter's hull. But Mac had known exactly where to place it. The 3-kilometer-tall war mech stumbled, its leg buckling as critical hydraulics failed. Thaklan fought, for balance, his massive arms windmilling, but physics had already claimed victory. The planet breaker crashed into an asteroid the size of a moon, the impact sending shockwaves through space-time itself. "How?" Thaklan roared, his mech systems failing one by one. "You are nothing. A primitive with crude tools." Mac's voice came through the comm channel, calm and steady. "I'm an engineer. I fix things that are broken." His shuttle moved through, the debris field surrounding the fallen mech. "Your left knee actuator had a design flaw. Poor weight distribution under lateral stress. I fixed it." Zarakel phase-shifted through multiple timelines, trying to find a moment where she could strike, before Mac could react. But every timeline showed the same result. The humans somehow anticipated her attacks, moved to counter them before she'd even decided to make them. "You cannot see the future," she snarled, flickering between possible selves. "Don't need to," Mackie replied, welding a shaped charge to her command ship's hull even as her past and future selves tried to stop him. "I can see the present. See how your phase drive creates temporal echoes 3.7 seconds before displacement. See how your ship's hull stress patterns show exactly where you're going to materialize." The charge detonated, not destroying Zarakel's ship but severing its connection to the time stream. She found herself locked in the present moment, her greatest weapon turned into a prison. Vexmore watched her fellow champions fall and felt something she had never experienced in 3 millennia of conquest. Fear. Not fear of death. She had transcended physical form long ago. Fear of failure, fear of facing something beyond her understanding. "What are you?" she whispered. Mac's shuttle hung motionless in space, its hull reflecting the light of distant stars. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every sleepless night, every unanswered call, every dream of a daughter who would never come home. "I'm a father who couldn't fix the most important thing in his life. So I'm going to break everything that took her away from me." Vexmore felt the human's mind touch hers. Not an attack, but a sharing. For one terrible moment she experienced Mac's loss as if it were her own. The psychic backlash sent her screaming across dimensions, her form dissolving into component thoughts and memories. The champions, legends of the hegemony, beings who had ended civilizations, lay defeated in the asteroid field. And Mac Sullivan, chief engineer, was already plotting a course toward the next target. Admiral Kextar, watching from his distant command ship, felt his certainty crumble like a star collapsing into a black hole. If the champions could not stop this human, what could? Admiral Kextar stood before the Hegemony High Council in chains of psychic energy, his career and life hanging by threads of quantum probability. The council chamber existed in folded space-time, its crystalline walls reflecting the deaths of 1,000 species. The 7 council members, being so ancient they had transcended physical form millennia ago, flickered with the cold light of dying galaxies. "Explain," the Prime Counselor's voice resonated through dimensions, each word carrying the weight of cosmic authority. "How one primitive has destroyed our greatest fleet and defeated our champions." The tactical display materialized in the chamber's center, showing the Sol system in real time. Over 60 capital ships now drifted as lifeless hulks, their crews either dead or evacuated. The green dot that represented Mac Sullivan moved methodically through the wreckage, salvaging what he needed for his next assault. "The human does not fight as we understand warfare," Kextar began, his voice steady despite his terror. "He strikes at critical systems with surgical precision, transforms our own technology against us, shows tactical knowledge that should be impossible for his species." Counselor Vashitai, whose consciousness spanned 17 dimensions, studied the data with growing unease. This being displays understanding of quantum mechanics, hyperspace engineering, psionic resonance frequencies. Yet Earth's civilization has barely achieved faster-than-light communication. "Perhaps," suggested Counselor Morden, "this is not random knowledge. Show us the human's background." The display shifted, revealing Mac's service record pieced together from intercepted Earth communications. The Council watched in growing alarm as the truth became clear. Mac Sullivan had spent 40 years maintaining and repairing ships not just from Earth, but from a dozen different species. Trade vessels, exploration craft, even captured hegemony scouts. All had passed through his workshops at some point. "He learned from us," Kextar whispered, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Every ship we lost to pirates, every damaged vessel abandoned at the edge of our territory. He studied them all. Learned our weaknesses by fixing our technology." Counselor Zephyros materialized more solidly, her anger causing reality to ripple around her. "You are telling us that this human has acquired 40 years of tactical intelligence through routine maintenance work?" "More than that," said Counselor Yilmoth, whose psychic abilities rivaled those of the fallen champion Vexmore. "I sense something else in this being's mind. He fights not with hope of victory, but with certainty of purpose. He has no fear because he has already lost everything that mattered to him." The display zoomed in on Mac's shuttle as it approached another hegemony vessel. The Council watched in fascination and horror as the human somehow convinced the ship's own security systems to let him board, then systematically disabled its engines by targeting a single, seemingly unimportant component that caused cascade failures throughout the entire propulsion matrix. "Genius," breathed Counselor Talrex. "Terrifying genius born from grief and rage." "The question," said the Prime Counselor, "is how do we stop him? Our fleets are broken, our champions are dead, or incapacitated, and now our outer territories are beginning to rebel, inspired by news of his victories." Kextar felt the weight of the hegemony's 3,000-year dominion pressing down on him. In the outer rim, species that had cowered before their might for generations were suddenly finding courage. The humans' impossible war had become a symbol, proof that the hegemony could bleed. "There is one option," he said carefully. "The planet-killer Oblivion. We could destroy the entire Sol system, eliminate the threat permanently, and create a martyr whose legend would inspire rebellion for millennia," Counselor Vashatai replied, coldly. "No, we need this human alive or completely broken. Otherwise, his example will shatter our empire from within." The Prime Counselor's form pulsed with dark energy. "Then we will give him what he wants most. Summon the World Ender. Load it with our most advanced bioweapons. If grief drives him to this fury, let us see how he responds when we threaten to share that grief with every human in the galaxy." As the council members began to fade back to their higher dimensions, Kextar realized with growing horror what they intended. They would not destroy humanity quickly. They would make Mac watch as they consumed his species slowly, planet by planet, life by life. But in his desperation to save the hegemony, the Admiral had overlooked one critical fact. Mac Sullivan was an engineer who had learned to fix things by understanding how they broke. And for the past week, he'd been studying exactly how the hegemony's empire worked. He was about to fix it. Permanently. The World Ender emerged from hyperspace like a wound. In reality itself, its massive bulk casting shadows across entire planets. The ship was more than a weapon. It was a statement of absolute power, designed to break the will of entire civilizations before a single shot was fired. Max Sullivan studied it through his shuttle's sensors and smiled for the first time in days. "Control, this is Ghost Rider," he transmitted to Earth. "I'm seeing a hegemony super-dreadnought, roughly 15 kilometers long, bristling with enough firepower to glass continents. Estimated crew complement, 200,000. The response from Earth Control was immediate and desperate. "Mac, get out of there. That's the ship they use to execute entire species." "You can't—" "Actually," Mac interrupted, his voice carrying that particular tone Sarah used to tease him about. The one that meant he'd figured out a particularly clever solution to an impossible problem. "I think I can." For the past week, Mac had been doing more than just destroying hegemony ships. He'd been learning. Every vessel he boarded, every system he sabotaged, every piece of alien technology he reverse-engineered had taught him something new about how the hegemony's empire functioned. And what he'd learned was that they had a single, catastrophic point of failure. The hegemony's entire fleet operated on a quantum-entangled command network. Every ship, every weapon, every critical system was connected through subspace to a central command matrix. It was a feat of engineering that allowed perfect coordination across galactic distances, but it also meant that if someone could access that network with the right knowledge and the right tools. Mac looked down at the heavy wrench in his hand, now modified with components salvaged from dozens of alien ships. What had started as a simple maintenance tool had evolved into something unique in the galaxy. A device that could interface with any technology, understand any system, and more. Importantly, convince any computer that he belonged there. The World Ender's hangar bay doors were sealed, its shields were at maximum power, and its point defense systems would vaporize any attacking craft long before it reached the hull. But Mac wasn't planning to attack the ship. He was planning to fix it. "Sarah," he whispered to his daughter's memory, "remember when you asked me how I always knew exactly which wire to cut to fix the most complicated systems?" His shuttle began moving toward the super-dreadnought, not in an attack vector, but in the lazy spiral of a damaged ship seeking help. "I told you it was because I listened to what the machine was trying to tell me. Every system wants to work properly. You just have to understand what it needs." The World Ender's automated systems scanned Mac's shuttle and identified it as a damaged maintenance craft with failing life support. Standard hegemony protocols dictated that such vessels should be brought aboard for salvage and crew processing. Mac's shuttle settled gently into the hangar bay, and he began his final approach to the ship's engineering section. The wrench in his hand hummed with power, its modified systems already interfacing with the ship's internal network. But aboard the command bridge, Admiral Kextar was receiving disturbing reports from across the galaxy. Hegemony fleets were reporting system malfunctions, communication breakdowns, and in 3 cases, complete mutinies as enslaved species turned their ships' weapons against their oppressors. "Sir," his communication officer reported, voice shaking, "we're receiving coded transmissions from the outer territories. The rebels are calling it the Engineers Protocol. They're saying that someone has shown them how to turn our own technology against us. Kextar felt his foreheart sink as the terrible truth became clear. The human hadn't just been destroying ships randomly. He'd been sending detailed technical information to every species the hegemony had conquered, teaching them how to sabotage their oppressors from within. Find that human, Kextar snarled. The World Ender's lights flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, only the emergency systems remained active, casting the massive ship in an eerie red glow. Deep in the engineering section, Mac Sullivan placed his hand on the central command matrix and spoke words that would echo across the galaxy. "Hello, Hegemony. My name is Marcus Sullivan. You killed my daughter." His voice carried through every speaker on every ship in the entire fleet. "Now let me show you what happens when an engineer gets really, really angry." The quantum-entangled network that had held the hegemony together for 3 millennia began to unravel, and Mac Sullivan was just getting started. The collapse of the hegemony took exactly 17 minutes and 34 seconds. Mac's modified wrench, now interfaced directly with the quantum command matrix aboard the World Ender, sent a single, elegant virus through the entire network. Not a destructive virus. Mac was still an engineer at heart, but a liberating one. Every slave collar deactivated, every mind control implant shut down, every automated weapon system recognized enslaved species as friendly and their hegemony, oppressors as threats. Across 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived in chains for generations suddenly found themselves free, and they were very, very angry. Admiral Kextar watched his empire die from the bridge of the World Ender, which was now completely under Mac's control. The tactical displays showed hegemony fleets turning on themselves as their own enslaved crews took control. Communication arrays broadcast detailed technical manuals in 100 different languages, teaching former slaves how to maintain and operate the ships that had once oppressed them. "How?" Kextar whispered as Mac appeared on the bridge, still wearing his jury-rigged armor, still carrying his impossibly modified wrench. "Simple engineering principle," Mac replied, his voice tired but steady. "If you want to fix something that's broken, you have to understand what it was supposed to do in the first place." He gestured at the displays showing the collapsing empire. "Your hegemony was supposed to bring order to the galaxy. Instead, it brought suffering. So I fixed it." Kextar's form began to flicker as his life support systems failed. "You have doomed the galaxy to chaos. Without our order, there will be wars, conflicts, the deaths of billions." Mac looked out through the viewport at the stars, each one now representing free worlds instead of conquered territories. "Maybe. But they'll be free to make their own mistakes instead of suffering under yours." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "My daughter used to say that the best gift you could give someone was the chance to fix their own problems." As news of the hegemony's fall spread through the galaxy, something unexpected happened. Instead of the chaos Kextar had predicted, the freed species began to cooperate. They had Mac's technical manuals, his modifications, his improvements to their technology. But more than that, they had his example, proof that one person with the right knowledge and enough determination could change everything. The Galactic Liberation Council formed within days, not as a new empire, but as a voluntary alliance of free worlds. Their first act was to establish the Sullivan Protocols, a set of engineering standards and ethical guidelines named after the human who had shown them that technology should serve life, not dominate it. Mac himself disappeared shortly after the hegemony's collapse. Some said he returned to Earth to help rebuild the orbital defenses. Others claimed he traveled to the Outer Rim, teaching former slaves how to maintain their newfound freedom. Few whispered that he had transcended physical form entirely, becoming one with the quantum networks he had mastered. But on a small memorial station orbiting the ruins of Luna Station 3, there was a simple plaque that told the real story. Chief Engineer Marcus Mac Sullivan, father, teacher, liberator. He promised his daughter he would fix what was broken. He kept his word. And beneath that, in smaller text, the words that had become the motto of the new Galactic Alliance. "Sometimes the most complex problems have the simplest solutions. You just need the right tools, steady hands, and the courage to keep fixing things until they work the way they're supposed to." In workshops across the galaxy, engineers of 100 different species worked with tools that bore Mac's modifications, guided by principles he had established. They built not weapons of war, but systems of peace. Communication networks that connected rather than controlled. Technologies that healed rather than harmed. The hegemony had lasted 3,000 years through fear and force. The civilization Mac Sullivan helped create would last far longer, built on something much more powerful. The simple understanding that broken things could always be fixed, if you cared enough to try. And somewhere among the stars, in the quiet spaces between worlds, the memory of a father's love continued to echo through the quantum foam, reminding the galaxy that even the smallest wrench, in the right hands, could move the universe.